Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Paravajakacharya Ashtottara Shri Srimad Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Paravajakacharya Ashtottara Shri Srimad Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavani Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glory to Sadhguru and Gauranga. I'm going to have to go upstairs. It's a little too distracting. So give me 5 minutes. Yeah.
Disappeared, it was magic.
I'm sorry?
I came back in and you were gone, and I said, you disappeared like magic.
So did you. My eyes closed, you were gone.
Oh,
All right. I think we... Okay. There's more people than we see, because there's a lot of people online, too. This camera's here. So, sorry about that. All right, here we go. So... Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay, so we are text 2, I believe. Tapas, you there?
Text 4, Prabhu.
Text 4. Oh, text 4? Okay.
Yes, Prabhu.
Okay. So, on this 24th day of August in 2022 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. We are in chapter 6 entitled Dhyana-yoga, and we are in text number 4 on page 260. Yada hi nendriyarteshu na karmasu anushajjate sarvasankalpa sannyasi yogarudhas tadochyate yada hinendriyarteshu na karmasvanusajjate sarvasankalpa sannyasi yogarudhas tadochyate yada hinendriyarteshu na karmasvanusajjate sarvasankalpa sannyasi yogarudhas tadochyate yada hinendriyarteshu na karmasvanusajjate sarvasankalpa sannyasi yogarudhas tadochyate. Give it a shot. Yaha ninendriyarteshu na karmasvanusajjate sarvasankalpa sannyasi yogarudhas tadochyate. Anyone on Zoom?
Yes.
Go.
Yadahi nendriyarteshu
Yada hinendriyarteshu
na karmas anusajate
na karmasvanusajjate
sarvasankalpa sannyasi
sarvasankalpa sannyasi
yogarudhas tadochyate.
yogarudhas tadochyate. Okay. Yada, when, he, certainly, na, not, indriya arteshu, in sense gratification, na, never, karmasu, in fruitive activities, anushajjate, one necessarily engages, sarvasankalpa, of all material desires, sannyasi, renouncer, yoga arudhaha, elevated in yoga, tada, at that time, uchyate, is said to be. Translation. A person is said to be elevated in yoga when, having renounced all material desires, he neither acts for sense gratification nor engages in fruitive activities. Purport. When a person is fully engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, he is pleased in himself, and thus he is no longer engaged in sense gratification or in fruitive activities. Otherwise, one must be engaged in sense gratification, since one cannot live without engagement. Without Krishna consciousness, one must be always seeking self-centered or extended selfish activities. But a Krishna-conscious person can do everything for the satisfaction of Krishna, and thereby be perfectly detached from sense gratification. One who has no such realization must mechanically try to escape material desires before being elevated to the top rung of the yoga ladder. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanandana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmiditam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Sri Parampara, the disciplic succession. Time out for a little water. Okay. So, Krishna begins this chapter on Dhyana-yoga, which is the traditional eightfold yoga system, beginning with yama and niyama, asana. Yama is the don'ts, actually. Niyama is the do's. And then sitting. And then pratyahara, which is withdrawing the senses within, so they're not engaged in sense gratification. Then pranayama. Then dharana, concentration. That means pulling the mind back, pulling it back, come back from here, like that. You're fighting the mind. Then you come to the point when you somewhat experience of dhyana, actual meditation. And that matures into samadhi. That's eight steps. So he's describing here some progression. In text 3, he says, for one who is a neophyte in the Eightfold Yoga system, work is said to be the means. And for one who is already elevated in yoga, cessation of all material activities is said to be the means. So in other words, someone starting yoga, you've got a big momentum in activities. You're used to doing things. So you try to do things that are not sense gratification. The service, selfless service, is not as focused as we are, where we're serving Krishna directly, but you're active in various things. That may include the Hatha Yoga principles. There's so much bending and stretching and balancing the airs in the body so that you can sit. And then, when you come to the point that we read today, a person is said to be elevated, not a neophyte anymore, in yoga, when having renounced all material desires, he neither acts for sense gratification nor engages in fruitive activities. So what's the distinction between acting for sense gratification and engaging in fruitive activities? Well, my understanding is that fruitive activities means that you're working, but you're not actually enjoying. You're trying to get a fruit, say some money, which then you can engage in sense gratification. So that's the thing. One is literally acting in sense gratification, and the other is working so you can enjoy sense gratification. That's a fruitive activity. So, but the yogi engages in neither of those. So that he's withdrawing. It's all very austere. Krishna will describe the ideal yogi as alone in a lonely place, in a sacred place, and working on himself with the breath and the mind, and it can be a real struggle. You can imagine. All right, let's go on, unless there's any questions. Now, here the next verse is very important because it talks about the mind. Udharet atmanatmanam. Udharet atmanatmanam. Natmanam abhasadiyet. Atmaiva yatmano bandhu. Atmaiva yatmano bandhu. Atmayeva Rupa Atmanaha. A lot of Atmas in that verse, like 7 or 8 of them. One must deliver himself with the help of his mind and not degrade himself. The mind is the friend of the conditioned soul and his enemy as well. Purport. The word Atma denotes body, mind, and soul, depending upon different circumstances. In the yoga system, the mind and the conditioned soul are especially important. Since the mind is the central point of yoga practice, Atma refers here to mind, to the mind. Okay, so which Atma? The first Atma, Atmana. See? Urdhvade Atmana. By the mind one must deliver. What are you delivering? The soul, Atmana. So the word Atma here denotes mind. The purpose of the yoga system is to control the mind and to draw it away from attachment to sense objects. It is stressed herein that the mind must be so trained that it can deliver the conditioned soul from the mire of nescience. In material existence, one is subjected to the influence of the mind and the senses. In fact, the pure soul is entangled in the material world because the mind is involved with the false ego, which desires to lord it over material nature. Therefore, the mind should be trained so that it will not be attracted by the glitter of material nature, and in this way the conditioned soul may be saved. One should not degrade oneself by attraction to sense objects. The more one is attracted by sense objects, the more one becomes entangled in material existence. The best way to disentangle oneself is to always engage the mind in Krishna consciousness. The word he is used for emphasizing this point. That word comes in on the second line, Atmava hi Atmano Bandhu. The word he is used for emphasizing this point. That is, that one must do this. It is also said, Mana eva manushyanam karanam bandha mokshayohu bandhaya vishaya sango muktyai nirvishayam manaha. For man, mind is the cause of bondage and mind is the cause of liberation. Mind absorbed in sense objects is the cause of bondage, and mind detached from sense objects is the cause of liberation. Amrita Bindu Upanishad. 2. Therefore, the mind which is always engaged in Krishna consciousness is the cause of supreme liberation. So this is a often quoted verse, because in Krishna consciousness we're practicing yoga, but we all have minds, and the mind is filled with so many ideas and experiences that have nothing to do with Krishna. So that mind is actually the key element in Krishna consciousness, in any practice of yoga. So, urdhvade atmanatmanam, one should elevate himself by the mind. One must deliver the self by the mind. So what to do with the mind? Well, that's where all of this chanting and hearing comes in. With this mantra, because it's composed entirely of pure spiritual sound, Krishna's name, two varieties of Krishna's names, Krishna and Rama, that Rama can also mean Krishna, and Radharani's name, Hare. The Hare Krishna mantra itself is the perfect object of meditation, just by chanting and hearing. Because, in other words, in the material sphere, one conditions the mind and he also conditions the senses. The senses become habituated. But if we're not completely addicted to some sense gratification, so that we can't withdraw the mind, that's a very difficult position to be in. But we may be troubled, we may be depressed a little bit, whatever, but we have some free agency. We can think of this or we can think of that. We can engage in this way or that way. So if someone has the inspiration, the key is the intelligence. You hear Bhagavad Gita, you hear Srimad Bhagavatam, you hear devotees speaking, and you can see that directly how much they've benefited, and they can show you, and you can tell, oh yes, I used to be like this, but now I'm peaceful and happy. Then the spark of faith is planted. Well, maybe this process will be good for me too. This is how we engage in everything. If you want to get back in good shape, we go to the yoga studio. Other people just go to the gym. And you go there and there's fit people working out. Yeah, I can be like that too. Yeah, before and after. Here's what I looked at, you know. Yeah, now the faith is there, right? And so you engage and it works, you know. So similarly, Krishna consciousness is the same way. But because it's very subtle, there's more need for a philosophy and an understanding of how it's working, because it's not so evident. These are all subtle energies we're working with here, you know. But still, there's also an external demonstration. You can see the person is more peaceful and happy. And so the faith is there. So, Urade Atmanatmanam says, don't degrade oneself by the mind. How to degrade myself by the mind? Just expose it to everything that's out there with no, restraint. In other words, whatever is interesting, let me get into it. Whatever appeals to my fancy, let me get into it. This is the famous Shreyas and Preyas. You heard of the Shreyas and Preyas dichotomy. Preyas is immediate pleasure. The more one is involved with the immediate needs of the senses, the more animalistic one is, the more in the mode of ignorance as a human being. In other words, I don't have any philosophy. Whatever feels good, do it. This was like in the 60s, we'd hear that. Yeah, you act like that, and after a while, nothing will feel good. You'll be in constant pain. If it feels good, okay, let me have the third bag of Doritos. Feels good, tastes great. What's the problem? Not even wondering about the indigestion you're going to get in an hour, what to speak of putting on fat and getting diabetes. The point is that that's no way to live. And even on the material plane, people realize that who are a little intelligent, not to just indulge the senses unlimitedly, because that causes a lot of disease, suffering. So, but even the normal, how do you say, average sense gratification that's thought to be wholesome, just family life. 11 kids, in India you'd have extended families like that, or you have your own kids, 4 kids, and you have your cousins living with you. It's huge. That can form a tremendous web of attachment. And that's why in the Vedic culture you have the standard practice of having a limitation on that, so that there's a time for retirement and there's a time for sannyas and everything. That to try to mitigate or loosen those bonds of attachment, because you're interested in Shreya, the ultimate good. So the Shreya, and then there's this word Nikshreya. This verse that I always chant, Prabhupada always chanted it too. Labdvasu durlamamidam bahusambhavante manusham. That after many, many births, you finally got a human form of life. It's rare, but so now we're all human beings, and we understand from we don't remember, but we understand. Yes, we've come through different species. We have so many different lives. Now we have a human life, and not only any human life, but a fortunate human life, because we have come in touch with this philosophy that can end completely our entanglement in this world of birth and death. So in Manusham Artadam. Artadam means it can give what's really valuable. This Manusham, the human form, it has the same word, Manusham. But like all forms of life, it's anityam, it's not eternal, it's temporary. The clock is ticking. So one has to be dhira. This is a key word. This word comes up at the beginning of the Gita. You know this verse, Arjun. You probably know it too. Dehinosmin yada dehe kaumaram yovanam jara. No? Learn it by tomorrow. Come on, you can do this. 2:13. You've heard it before. Dehinosmin yada dehe kaumaram yovanam jara tata dehantaram praptir dhiras tatra namuyati. So Krishna is saying there, just as the soul passes, now use the word Kamara, which is a male child, but of course it's a female child, that you go through childhood, Yovanam, youth, and Jara, old age, compresses it all in three stages. Tata dehantara prapti. So the same soul is passing through these different stages. We all have a different body than we had yesterday, what to speak of 10 years ago, 20 years ago. So obviously our body is changing bodies. We're all our own individual changing body exhibit. And we're going. So the soul isn't changing. That you're the same knower of this body, but the body is changing. The field that you know, the Kshetra is another word in the 13th chapter for the soul. So we're passing through, And then Krishna says, but we don't know what came before this body, and we have no real understanding of what comes after. But Krishna tells us. He says, yes, najayate, there's no birth for the soul. You've had a different body, but you passed through a body before. Now you're passing through this body, and then when this body's finished, you'll get another body. He's saying in that. So now, then the key, dhira satanamuyati. Now this dhira means someone who is self-controlled, not freaked out by, It's not referring to the soul in the body who's dying. It's referring to Arjuna, who's watching and who is so disturbed by the imminent death that he will help cause of his guru and his grandfather and all these beloved friends and relatives. So he's identifying with the body relationships. But Krishna is saying, that's foolish, because they've all had different bodies and you have different bodies. You're just passing in the night like strangers, So one should be sober-minded and see the higher picture. In other words, Arjuna, yes, this is painful for you on one level, but think of it, they're all benefiting because they're going to get killed in the presence of Krishna. So all of these souls, they're not going back. You can't save them whether you leave the battlefield or not. The only question is whether you're going to do your duty and help to reestablish Dharma in this world. If you leave the battlefield, then who knows what the other Pandavas will do, because you're the main fighter. In other words, you may be the cause of Adharma reigning in the form of Duryodhana and the brothers. So that'll be a great sin on your part. So that's the whole purpose of Krishna speaking at the beginning there in the second chapter. So understanding that, so this verse says, Manushamarta dhamanichamapiya dhira. One has to be dhira, means sober-minded, and consider things impartially. And then turnam yateta, one has to strive without delay. We don't know how many hours, minutes, seconds, or months, or years we have left. So make as much progress as possible. Turnam yateta, strive. Now the striving is important here with the sannyasis, because this is all about sannyas. Every verse here, it talks about the yogi and the sannyasi, they're the same, self-control. So he says, Turnam yateta, napateta no mrityavad, as long as you haven't fallen down and died, so you have some control of the body. So one should strive for what? What should you strive for? Isn't that the question of life? Most people think, what should I strive for? Oh, I got to make the body comfortable, I have to make money, I have to get material things. But that's all foolish, because you're investing in a body that's going to eventually die. The whole enterprise, whatever wealth, whatever prestige, whatever relationships, whatever you've got, it's all finished. It's just like a Monopoly game. Really get into it and think it's real and it's life and death, whether I get this or that. No, it's just a game, It'll be all pieces of Prabhupada talks like that. It's like a mirage. So he's saying, one should strive for the ultimate good. Nikshayasaya. This is what you should strive for. Vishayakala sarvataksya, because we've already experienced all of these different kinds of sense gratification. So in other words, we've been there, done that. What has it gotten us? Gotten another material body to suffer old age, disease, and death. So therefore, what is that ultimate good? That we have to learn from the Shastra, because we can't understand what it is. What is the ultimate thing we should strive for, Arjuna, Prabhu, Bhakta Arjuna? What are we working for here, right, in the Hare Krishna movement?
Is to surrender to the Supreme.
What for? Why?
So we don't have to come here again and again.
That's it.
To break the cycle of birth and death.
Yes, that is the kind of the bottom line. In Bhakti Yoga, we understand that goal will be achieved as a byproduct if we can attain prema bhakti. Then the liberation is at its train. There's a wonderful verse by Bhuvamangal Thakur where he says that. First of all, Lord Chaitanya says, fourth verse of the Shikshastika, Nadanang najanang nasundari kapitang vajagadisha kamaye mama janmani janmanishware bhavatad bhakti nahoitu kitvahi. He says what he doesn't want. I'm not coming to you, my Lord, as some, because you're like on the same level of Indra or Surya or Chandra or Brahma, and begging for some material thing. No nadanam, no wealth in all of its forms. No jana, no followers. I don't want to be leader of a big clan or an army or a nation. No, I don't care about that. Nasundarim, not because I want a beautiful wife or whatever, you know. Kavitam. Now, kavitam has different meanings. One is great erudition. You know, that's also an opulence, right? Knowledge. Jagadisha, O Lord of the universe. I recognize you're the Lord of the universe. You can give me any of those things, but that's not what I'm asking you for. And then he says, Mama Janmani Janmani Shure. Now, by saying that, he implies he's also not asking for liberation, because in liberation there's no rebirth. So now he's saying birth after birth. He said he's taking a humble position. I know I'm so sinful, I'm going to get birth after birth. But here's what my prayer is. Janmani Shure, Bhavatad Bhaktir Ahayutuki Tuhi. May there be unmotivated bhakti unto you. Now, that unmotivated bhakti, we say ahoituki, means without cause. But there's always some motivation for activity. So what it means is no material motivation. This is expanded upon by Rupa Goswami, where he says, Anyabhilashita shunyam jnana karma jnanavratam. So this is what pure bhakti is not. Anya abhilashita shunyam. It is devoid of any other desire, and then he lists the categories. Jnana, karma, anavatam. Desire for knowledge, which leads to liberation, or karma, which leads to sense gratification. And when adi, anything else you come up with. Jnana, karma, anavatam. Not covered, not diluted, not obscured by these things. I'm not praying to God, please, 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 you know, cure my disease. Please, 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 let me pay the rent. It can be very sincere. But it's not pure. It's not what we should play. That's not pure bhakti as taught by Lord Chaitanya. So what do you pray for? Ahayutuki tuhi, unmotivated service to you. In other words, what's the motivation? Pure love. That's the only other motivation there is. If it's not something material, then it's only simply to please Krishna. And the irony of the paradox is that kind of motivation and that kind of service gives you the highest happiness. But that's not your motivation, but you get it anyway. Krishna bestows upon you, you see? Eternal life in the spiritual world, you know, eternal youth, you know, no death and rebirth, what to speak of that. And ever fresh, new varieties of spiritual pleasure in relation to Krishna. It's practically inconceivable. You know, we can't imagine it, but that's the reality. So that's what this verse says. You've got the human form of life. Don't waste it. It's very rare. Without wasting any time, strive as hard as you can, according to the principles of bhakti, for the ultimate good, going back home, back to God, and rejoining Krishna. That's what it's all about. And here, now back to our verse, don't degrade by yourself by the mind. The whole thing is the mind. The mind is you know, I like to say, it's kind of stupid, has a mind of its own. In other words, you don't want to think about this, but you can't help it because somebody, you know, insulted you on Facebook or something. You know. Now it's it's funny, but it could be devastating. I mean, this internet business and all of this instant is disaster for the society. I was just thinking about it because, you know, who doesn't know about these, you know, these series of shootings in the schools and the churches and all this, random shootings. I mean, when you walk down the street, you know, it's kind of, it's part of civilized life or sane life that you don't have to think, my God, anybody who passes by could just pull out a gun and shoot me. Just for no reason. How can you live like that? You know? But that's what it's turning into. Everybody's got guns. There's more, you know, there's 400 million guns in this. But there's only like, you know, 1/3 of the people who have guns. That means a whole bunch of people have whole armories. You know that. It's insane.
They show off on Facebook and Instagram that we have these many guns.
Yeah. Because it gives you a sense of power. It's false, but it's you know, but it's insane. And so I was just reading this article how the people who train teachers, it's getting very difficult because because as soon as there's some shooting, it can be anywhere. The odds of actually there being a shooting in the local school are very, very low. But because it's such a dramatic thing, everyone knows about it all the time, and so the impact on your heart, you know, on your consciousness can be devastating. He says, I don't want to be a teacher. It's too dangerous. You know, I wanted to be a teacher to help kids, you know, but now I got to be there and you know about it. And then the kids know about it too. And they're scared to go to school, all because of the internet. I mean, these horrible things have been happening all the time, but now everyone knows about them, you know, and it means that it's right in your face, right on your phone. It's crazy. Hare Krishna. Yeah, welcome. We'll have darshan at 8:15. You're welcome. You sit there, you can sit on the bench. The benches are very comfortable, more than the seats. And would you like to have a book to follow along? Or? Yeah, we're on page 260 right now. How about you? You're okay? All right. So we're studying chapter 6 of the Bhagavad Gita, and text 5 actually on page 261, how the mind is the best friend of the living entity and the worst enemy. And the mind that is, as we read in the purport, is a very nice verse. The mind that's absorbed in Vishaya Sango, attachment for the objects of the senses, is the worst enemy. But that same mind, when it's detached from that and is an agent for liberation, is the best friend. So the process of Krishna consciousness makes our mind the best friend, where after some time you're used to thinking of Krishna. If you keep chanting and chanting and chanting, and you're reading Bhagavad Gita, and you see, oh, I am the light of the sun and the moon. Well, the next time the sun comes up, I can think, let me be reminded of Krishna. It's Krishna's energy. And the fragrance of all the senses are covered. The fragrance of the earth, or the fragrance of any flower. So all the senses, you know, your life, you can be reminded of Krishna. But what breaks the meditation? When you try to use those things for your own pleasure, when they become vicious, then you have to forget Krishna. You have to forget that He's the ultimate beneficiary, that He's the ultimate enjoyer of the source. You see? So now, what's real detachment? This is defined by Rupa Goswami in our main book, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. He says, Anasaktasya vishayan, anasaktasya vishayan, yataham priyunjata, nirbandha, Krishna sambandhe, yuktam vairagyam uchyate. This principle of vairagya is very important, because we're meant to be raganuga bhaktas, to cultivate more and more desire to serve Krishna, to hear about Krishna, to glorify Him, to have our whole being absorbed and you know. But here this is vairagya. Vairagya refers to minimizing the raga or attraction for material things. So here this is the definition of real vairagya. Vairagya and vidya go together, and knowledge. This is, I remember, I'm old enough to remember, when they started putting on the cigarette packs the warnings. Cigarette smoking can be hazardous to your health. It was a big fight to do that, because who wants to try to sell something which says it's hazardous to your health? But the cigarette companies knew that there would still be enough people ready to buy it, even though this warning is on there. But what is the idea behind that? The idea is that, well, children especially, they haven't gotten into smoking. They'll read it and say, well, I don't want to hurt my health. So the knowledge that it's hazardous, scientifically, will give you detachment from cigarette smoking. Overcome the desire to be one of the, you know, cool guys who can smoke, like the actors on the screen. When I grew up, all the actors on the movies and everything were smoking. So naturally, I took up smoking. 7 years I smoked. So luckily, not too much. This is like 60 years ago. So hopefully, so but the point is, by knowledge, you become detached. What is this? We had this whole COVID thing. It's still going on, right? So now we know. I'm not sick now, but I know about it because I read about it. And you know that if I'm in a enclosed room, I have a larger percentage of chance of getting COVID. You know, I don't know who I'm sitting next to. So there's all of these precautions you take. You know, you become detached. I'm not going to go to the movies. You know, I'm not going to go to the bar and sit there with other people. You're detached from that, even though you want to, but you're detached, because the threat is too much. So knowledge can help you be detached, and that's that. So what's our knowledge? The knowledge of the Bhagavad Gita is that any sense gratification you engage in, where you're the object of trying to enjoy, that's entangling you more in this material world. So you're going to get birth and death again, death and then rebirth. You know. And without any restrictions, you're bound to perform some sinful activity. When I grew up, I mean, I was just a regular guy. I remember when McDonald's was founded in about 1960 or so. And I remember suddenly we would go bowling at this one bowling alley, and then suddenly there was this place in McDonald's. Oh, great! Now we can have a cheeseburger and fries before we go bowling. You know, and that was our regular thing. I never thought it was sinful. I didn't know. I didn't, you know. And you forget, they package and say, well, you're not even conscious of the poor animal, you know, in agony getting slaughtered. It's just meat. That's what it is. That's groceries. So out of ignorance, you commit so much sin, and then you suffer like anything. So knowledge says, no, 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 I shouldn't do that. You know, it makes perfect sense. But Krishna consciousness gives you the alternative. You come to there's a temple, and there's a Sunday feast. It's all prasadam. You have the nice pakoras, and you have the samosas and the things you forget all about in McDonald's. You see? So it's not just not doing it. It's engaging the senses in the service of Krishna, and get the higher taste. Then it's simple to give up the thing. You can I can't even imagine it. I have absolutely zero desire to have a cheeseburger. And what happened in that desire? I had it when I was 14 and 15. But then, when you want to become a vegetarian for health reasons, we have many, many more books in the closet. Arjun, go get another Bhagavad Gita, please. So we're on page 261. So this very important verse about uplifting oneself by the mind, but you need to use the intelligence. So you fill the mind with ideas of Krishna and with the Hare Krishna mantra. The Hare Krishna mantra itself is like a complete process of yoga, just chanting. Because it purifies the mind and the heart as, page 261. What does Lord Chaitanya say in his Shikshastika? These eight verses of instruction, the Shikshastika, which is the foundation of this whole process of devotion, of bhakti yoga. So he says in this first verse, it's so important, I'll give you the whole thing with my little poetic translation. Cheto darpana marjanam, bhava mahadavagni nirvapanam. Shreya kai, there's the word Shreya again. Shreya kaidava chandrika vataranam, vidyavadhu jivanam, anandam buddhivardhanam, pratibadam purnamitasvadanam, sarvatmasnaparam param vijayate Shri Krishna sankirtanam. That Atma comes in again. Atma's soul, you see. So the first thing he says, all glories to the chanting of Shri Krishna's holy names, which easily extinguishes samsara's blazing flames by polishing the lust-encrusted mirror of the heart. That chanting is the waxing moon that knows the secret art of causing the white lotus of good fortune to unfurl its petals far and wide throughout this bleak and blighted world. Of transcendental knowledge, which will take us to life's goal, the chanting of the name of Krishna is the life and soul. The ocean of ecstatic bliss floods far beyond its bounds wherever Krishna's merciful and mystic name resounds. Indeed, whenever Krishna's names are sung in congregation, at every step one tastes a joy that knows no limitation. So hear with great attention as I earnestly request, please chant Shri Krishna's holy names and be supremely blessed. The soothing nectar of the name will bathe your consciousness, bestow pure love for Krishna, and eradicate distress. The whole philosophy is right there, and it's one verse. So the first proposition is Cheto Darpana Marjanam. All these metaphors he uses. The heart is like a mirror. You know, whatever comes in, it gets reflected there. And if it has dust on it, we can't see ourselves properly. We can't understand what we are. We think with this body, or maybe the mind. But we're neither of those things. We're the pure soul, unchanging, ever existing and primeval. We're the knower of the body. So that consciousness has to be polished or cleansed of the dust of lust, material desire from many, many births. So that's the first installment, Cheto Darpana Marjanam. The mirror of the heart is being polished or cleansed. And by that, Bhava Mahadavagni Nivapanam, the blazing fire of birth and death in material life is extinguished. Once we understand that we're pure souls, and we act for our true self-interest, which is bhakti, then we can not come back again. In other words, even in this life, we can feel the mitigation of the sufferings of, the threefold miseries. So then, Shreya Kaidava Chandrikavananam. So this word Shreya we were talking about, the ultimate good. It's like a lotus, And the chanting is like this moonshine. It's a night-blooming lotus, and it's opening its petals far and wide. Both personally, our lives become auspicious when we chant, and when chanting in public, we're making other people's lives auspicious by their hearing, and it's having a subtle effect and maybe attracting. Vidya Vadu Jivanam, and it's the life and soul of transcendental knowledge. We should know that we've been in this world for a long, long time, in the material world, so many births and deaths of Brahma and all this stuff. So that's all due to ignorance. We don't know who we are, we don't know who God is, we don't know who this world is, what the relationship is. So chanting the holy name awakens our natural knowledge. It's all in there, but it has to be awakened. And it gets fortified from outside as well. We become interested in Krishna. You chant a little Hare Krishna, so well, that was pretty far out experience. Let me see what it's all about. So let me, I saw it online. Maybe I should look up the local temple. So then you come in touch with Prabhupada's books, with the vidya, with the knowledge. And then the intelligence is now being purified. And that's really important, because it gives you the faith and the determination to overcome the hurdles in Krishna consciousness. We're so conditioned that it's very hard to be steady at first, and when so many things distract us. So that vidya is all important, because with that comes vairagya, becomes detachment. So then the anandam buddhivardhanam. One gets in touch, you open up the channel to the ocean of happiness that's in your own heart. There's Krishna's there, the reservoir of pleasure. So that ocean of bliss is expanding. We've never experienced anything like it. Anandam buddhivardhanam. And then at every step of one's life, one can taste the happiness. Because you experience Krishna everywhere, and every one of your activities, every breath, every movement, everything is an act of devotional service. I'm not doing anything in the pure state. That's not part of my service to Krishna. So that he's reciprocating in love. It's all reciprocation. That's what bhakti is. So in that state of consciousness, you have absolutely no attraction to the material sense gratification. And it's all simply an act of love. So that's the anandam buddhivardhanam, patipadam purnamitasvadanam. So then he describes, and he invites everybody, please chant Hare Krishna, bathe your consciousness in this. Sarvatma snapadam. And then Vijayate Shri Krishna Sankirtanam. This Sankirtan, congregational chanting, it will ultimately be victorious in our own lives and at large. There's 10,000 years of Lord Chaitanya's reign. We're at the beginning of it. It's only 535, 40 years. So we're part of it. So that's what this verse is, what I get out of this verse. How to make your mind your best friend by training it to always remember Krishna and glorify Krishna. That's what the process of bhakti is. And it's 8:10, and the curtains will open at 8:15. So we have the time for one quick verse. And this is one, okay, so he says, Deheshti mangshaludide bimatam chajasva, jaya sutari sadhama matam vimuncha. Pushyani samjagadidham chanabhangatishtam, vairagya ragya rasiko bhava bhakti nishtam. Don't love the body, just a bag of flesh and blood and bone. Give up your sense of ownership for all you think you own. At every moment, see that your world totters on destruction. Become detached and learn to love the Lord without obstruction. Vairagya raga. Become attached to detachment. Vairagya raga, you see, and become a rasika. Rasika means someone who can taste the nectar of Krishna consciousness at every moment. It's possible. The process has been given. The books are there, the institution, the beads. We have prasadam for you. Thank you for visiting. Can you stay for the kirtan? Okay, so we'll have a kirtan in a few minutes. Thank you very much. All glory to Srila Prabhupada.